So, you're telling me you set boundaries. That's what you keep saying. You had boundaries, they crossed them, and that's why you're hurt. Alright. Let's slow this down. What did you actually say to them? Out loud. In words they couldn't misread. Not a sigh. Not a look. Not the silent treatment for 3 days hoping they'd figure it out. What did you say? You remember that moment, don't you? The one where something they did didn't sit right. And instead of naming it, you swallowed it. You told yourself it wasn't a big deal. You told yourself you didn't want to start a fight over something small. So, you said nothing. And you carried the weight of it alone, while they went to sleep that night thinking everything was fine. That wasn't a boundary. That was a complaint you never filed. And here's where it gets uncomfortable. They said, I didn't know you felt that way. And you got furious. Because to you it was obvious. Obvious from your tone. From the way you went quiet. From the way you didn't laugh at their joke. But obvious to you isn't the same as communicated. And deep down, you know that. You just didn't want it to be true. You wanted them to read your mind. And you wanted them to care enough to notice. You wanted the fact that you were hurt to be so loud in the room that they had to stop and ask. And when they didn't, you added it to the list. Another thing they did wrong. Another reason to resent them. But they weren't reading the list. Because you never showed them the list. You called it a boundary. It was a wish. A hope. A hint you dropped and prayed they'd pick up. And they didn't pick it up. Because it was never on the floor for them to see. Let's go back to the first time. The first time they did something that didn't feel right. It wasn't big. It almost never is. They made a joke about you in front of other people. Do you remember the joke? Do you remember the laugh that went around the room and how you laughed too, a beat late, because that's what you do? And you reacted. But you reacted carefully. You brought it up later, in private, in a soft voice. You said it stung a little. You framed it like a question, not an accusation. You gave them an easy way out and they took it. They said they didn't mean it that way. You said okay. You let it go. That was the first door. Then came the phone. They went through it. Didn't they? You caught them. And instead of asking the real question, why were you going through my phone, you asked it sideways. You made it smaller than it was. You accepted their answer even though you didn't believe it. You remember how your chest felt. You remember you didn't sleep well that night. And in the morning, you decided not to bring it up again, because bringing it up again would make it a thing. Is that right? That was the second door. And here's what you didn't see at the time. They were watching. Not in a cartoon villain way. They were watching the way people watch someone new, learning what you react to, what you let slide, how hard you push back when something hurts you. Everyone does that. The difference is what they did with the information. You know. A decent person learns your sore spots and avoids them. They map yours and walk straight toward them. Because now they know where the give is. Now they know exactly how much they can take before you'll do something about it. And you told them. Not in words. In your reaction, you told them, I'll mention it, I'll soften it, I'll frame it as a question, and then I'll drop it. And they heard you. Loud and clear. Do you remember when they said, you're being too sensitive? And you paused. You actually considered it. You wondered if maybe they had a point. That's the moment. Right there. That's when they learned your version of reality was negotiable. That if they pushed back hard enough, you'd start doubting what you felt. And once they know that about you, they don't unlearn it. You think you were being mature, don't you? Do think you were choosing your battles? You weren't. You were training them. You were showing them, in real time, that the cost of hurting you was a soft conversation and a quick recovery. That was the price. That was the entire price. And for that price, they could do it again. So they did. Now, look at what started happening to you. You started explaining yourself more. Small things. Where you were. Who you were with. Why you took so long to reply. Things you never used to explain to anyone. But now you did. Because you'd learned that not explaining led to a mood. And the mood led to a conversation you didn't want to have. You know the one, don't you? So, you started choosing your words before you said them. Rehearsing things in your head. Deciding which version of the truth would land easiest. You stopped saying things that used to just come out of your mouth. Didn't you? Because you already knew how they'd land. You already knew the face they'd make. The silence that would follow. The little comment 3 hours later. Well, you softened. You shrank. You edited yourself down to a version of you that wouldn't set anything off. And here's the thing you didn't notice. You started doing it even when they weren't in the room. Thinking about how you described your day when they got home. Deciding which friends text to show them and which one to leave on your phone. Do you remember doing that? You were managing them in their absence. You were carrying them everywhere. And then they said, "You're so much calmer now." And you took it as a compliment. It wasn't. It was the receipt. It was them noticing the training had worked. Now let's look at what your life actually looks like. You check their face before you speak. You check their tone before you answer. You read the room they're in before you walk into it. And you don't even notice you're doing it anymore, because it's just how you live now. That's the thing about adjusting. You don't remember what it felt like before. Do you remember what it felt like before? The rules changed. And they kept changing. Something that was fine on Tuesday was a problem on Friday. Something they laughed at last month made them cold this month. You couldn't keep up. You stopped trying to keep up. You just started apologizing faster, earlier, for things you hadn't even done yet. Just in case. Listen, that's not a relationship. That's a weather report. You're standing outside every day checking the sky to see if it's safe to go out. And they felt it. Don't think they didn't. They watched you check. They watched you apologize for nothing. They watched you cancel on your friend because they'd made a face when you mentioned it. And they said nothing. Because why would they stop something that was working? They said, "I never asked you to do that." And that's the line that probably made you feel crazy. Because technically, they didn't. They never said, "Don't see your friend." They never said, "Don't wear that." They never said, "Don't bring that up." They just made it expensive. They just made the cost of doing it higher than the cost of not doing it. And you did the math. Every single time. You know what that's called, don't you? That's control without the word no. That's a leash you put on yourself because they taught you where the walls were. They didn't have to build the cage. You built it. They just made sure you knew what happened when you touched the edges. And here's the part that's going to sting. You started defending them. To your friends. To your family. To yourself. When someone said something true about them, you got defensive. You explained their behavior. You gave context nobody asked for. You said things like, "They're just stressed, they had a hard childhood, they don't mean it like that." Do you remember saying those things? Out loud? To people who loved you? That wasn't loyalty. That was a hostage statement. That was you protecting the person who was hurting you, because protecting them had become the same thing as protecting yourself. And they knew. They always knew. Because every time you defended them, they got confirmation that the system was holding. That you were still inside it. That you still believed the version of the story where they weren't the problem. So, here's where we are. You don't have unclear boundaries. You have unclaimed ones. You know what hurts. You know what crosses a line. You've known it the first time, and every time since. You just never say it in a voice that comes with a consequence. And they notice. They always notice. You're not confused. You're being polite. And they use your politeness as permission. Do you see it now? They're not missing the signals. They're reading them perfectly. They watch you go quiet and keep going. They watch you soften your complaint and keep going. They watch you defend them to the people who love you and keep going. At no point are they lost. At no point are they confused about what you want. They're confirming, over and over, that what you want doesn't carry weight. And here's the truth you already know. A boundary without a consequence is a request. A request they can decline. A request they've been declining for a long time. You don't have to hate them. You don't have to turn them into a monster. You just have to stop pretending they don't know. Because the second you stop pretending they don't know, you can't unknow it. And you can't go back to the version of this where they're confused. That version is dead. So now you know. And knowing is the part that costs you. Because now you have to do something about it. Or not. That part's on you. If you decide to.